поставлю записывать.
We are very pleased to have here with us guests from Moscow. We have Alexandra Borisenko, who is a literary translator and scholar working in the field of comparative literature mainly. She is associate professor at the Department of General Philology at the Moscow State University. And her main field of research belongs to translation studies, to comparative literary studies. She is the author of a number of scholarly essays and a number of journalistic essays that deal with English literature from the Victorian period to the contemporary time. And our other guest, Victor Sonkin, is a scholar specializing in the theory of poetry, verse theory, as well as the South Slavic literature. He is very active as a journalist who contributes to various papers, particularly to the English language newspaper Moscow Times. Since 1999, Alexandra and Victor are teaching together a translation seminar and workshop at the Philological Faculty of the Moscow State University. The recent project of our two guests deals with the anthology. They compiled a book, anthology focused on the detective stories of the Victorian period of English literature. We are very happy to give
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
So the subject of our talk today is Russian language and translation, vices and virtues of borrowing. It is a modification of a lecture that I gave a couple of months ago at the University of Bergen in Norway, which was called Our Language is Doomed. And so the first part of this presentation will mostly focus on how the language, actually any language, is doomed, why is that so, and is there anything at all that we can do about it. Recently, a linguist, a doctor of linguistics, Maxim Krangaus, professor of Moscow State University for the Humanities, published a book called Русский язык на грани нервного срыва, Russian language on the nerve of, on the verge of nervous breakdown, where, among other things, he said, he said this: my position is this: the Russian language is not threatened by either the flood of borrowings and slang words or the major and most importantly fast changes that are happening to it. Russian will digest it, keeping something, discarding something else, it will work out new norms, and stability will replace chaos. Besides, chaos is not necessarily a bad thing. It brings to the fore the creative capabilities of the language, unfettered by strict norms. But this is about the extent of the point of view of a linguist that is expressed in this book. Everything else is written from the point of view of a terrified, educated person who is looking at the onslaught of various substandard norms, of borrowings, of cliches, of everything that we abhor when we read a newspaper or watch a TV program or anything else. And actually, we experience very much the same feelings. And we're kind of divided about that as well. But is this attitude, is this view of language as something that's being destroyed unique for Russia? And is it unique for our days when we have the very rapid advancement of various technologies that are also changing our language, when we have a global world which had never existed before, and so on? Here is an example. This is what Hans Weigel, an Austrian writer and critic, said in 1974. Every age claims that its language is more endangered and threatened by decay than ever before. In our time, however, language is really endangered and threatened by decay as never before. this is what was written in Der Spiegel in the year 2000. The spelling reform is irrelevant in the face of the ruin of our language caused by the spread of the unspeakable German-English linguistic brew. Okay, let's have a look at what was being said 100 years before that. A German philologist and historian, Gustav Wolfmann, said that language was so quickly transformed that it has become decayed and rotten. Added to this is the foreign foible that is the German's inherited weakness. The German may grow as old as you like, he will remain the fool of the other nations. There is widespread aping of the French and the English. Jakob Grimm, almost a century before that, famously said that 600 years ago every common peasant knew and used daily the perfections and subtleties of the German language, which the best language teachers can't even dream of these days. Doesn't it sound familiar? The famous scholar of Indo-European studies, August Schleicher, said that about the English language, now we're coming from the German to the English language and to what various notable people have to say about that the English language has moved away far from its written form, thus providing a clear proof as to how fast the language of historically and literally endowed people can sink. Dr. Johnson also very famously said that tongues, like governments, have a natural tendency to degeneration. Again, this is the middle of the 18th century. But this is a feeling that is quite widespread these days as well. So, for example, if we take a sample from a number of websites that are all over the internet, for example, this is an example from a conservative American website. So here, the author is saying that English at its peak was at the time of Chesterton, Goldsworthy, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. And it was limber, yet Harding, and so on and so forth. So basically, let's say about 70 years ago, 60 years ago, English was in top-notch form. It isn't anymore. Now, let's go back these 60 years, and we'll see that George Orwell said most people who bother with the matter at all would admit that the English language is in a bad way. And again, almost another 60 years, we see Thomas Sheridan, the father of the famous author Richard Brinsley Sheridan, saying that it is probable that English was spoken in its highest state of perfection during the reign of Queen Anne. So, naturally, let's have a look at what was said during the reign of Queen Anne by Jonathan Swift. And here he says, as you see, there is another set of men who have contributed very much to the spoiling of the English tongue. I mean, the poets from the time of the Restoration, and so on and so forth. So, as to form such harsh and harmonious sounds that none but a northern ear could endure. Now, of course, it's by no means limited to the English, right? German. Or Germans. It's not limited to Germanic languages. The French have also been complaining about their language since time immemorial. Right now, you see the journalist and literary critic Marc Fumeroli, who says that nothing grieves him more than seeing that in his old field, French language and literature are degraded by pretentious pedagogism, replete with jargon and ignorance, poisonous for the young minds. If we go to the time when people like Fumeroli probably think that at the time of Victor Hugo, the French language was at its best. So there is a famous exchange during the session of the Académie Française in 1843, when the linguist and writer Victor Cousin famously said that he knows exactly when the decay of the French language began, and it was in 1789. And to that, Victor Hugo famously replied, could you tell us at what hour exactly? the linguist Gaston Paris basically said that the reason for the decay of French language and other Romance languages was that they were essentially nothing but a degraded form of Latin. I guess you know what I'm going to show next. And this is, of course, a fragment from one of Cicero's dialogues, where again he moans the sad state of the Latin language, which used to be spoken very well. It was not corrupted by any domestic barbarism, and time, however, as well at Rome as in Greece, altered matters for the worse. And mind you, this is from the pen of someone who in some classical dictionaries isn't even mentioned by name, because if you see a classical quotation which is not attributed by default is Cicero. So there are several reasons,
main reasons for annoyance.
Yeah. And we'll briefly speak about a couple of them, and then we'll concentrate on the thing that apparently annoys people the most, the foreign words and borrowings. So here is a quote from Piotr Vяземский, Prince Piotr Vяземский, a friend of Pushkin, from his old notebook, which he was a compilation of notes and fragments that he used to write throughout his life. And he's here raging about a couple of words which, for any modern speaker of Russian, are completely innocuous, are completely normal, and can be used in the highest possible style. So they're completely okay. But for Prince Vяземский, these are shopkeepers' words, shopkeepers' lingo. Pushkin, in his article, The Russian Academy, written at the end of his life, wrote some very bitter words about the state of the Russian language. Words are mangled, grammar wavers, orthography is changed at anyone's whim. Our magazines have even less correct spelling than common sense, and so on. Again, this is from Pushkin. If you want to take an example of someone whose Russian language is considered to be the standard, that is, of course, Pushkin. Now, in Soviet times, this sentiment of the language being mangled, being distorted, and so on was quite strong. It is always strong, I guess. I try to show that. A Soviet writer, Boris Lavrinyov, writes that he suffers physically when he hears mangled Russian words like "chobы" instead of "ученье", "глажка" instead of "глаженье", and so on. People who speak like that are the mergers of the great mighty truth of the Russian language that was used with such purity and such love for its living sound by Lenin. In the Bergen lecture, I gave a couple of examples from the language used by Lenin, which were also very funny, because actually there was a phrase where in 2 lines, maybe 20, 25 words, all words were foreign, not a single Russian word or Slavic
origin.
Yeah. Admittedly, it was a kind of a discussion about philosophy, about very esoteric stuff. But nevertheless, one person can indeed rage about unnecessary use of foreign words, as Lenin used to do, and it was something that was inculcated in schoolboys in our time. It was a very famous article. And at the same time, he used such words very freely in some other context. Okay, this is it, but we'll probably just skip it. There is a funny kind of a digression, which is change of usage, but this is a change of usage which is actually in itself very non-standard. And this is the use of old old Russian orthography, the orthography before the reform of 1918. People are perceiving that as a sign of something